He says, "I'm not ready," but he still calls, still smiles, still touches your hand like it means something. You begin to wonder, am I asking for too much? No, you're just loving someone who's emotionally delayed. And today you're going to understand why that's not your burden to carry. There's something profoundly confusing about loving someone who keeps you at arm's length while pulling you closer. You felt it, that contradiction that makes you question your own intuition, your own worth. He's not ready isn't about you being too much. It's about a part of him that remains emotionally immature, unable to receive what you're offering. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." He doesn't know why he keeps coming back to you, but you might. See, what's happening here isn't personal rejection, it's psychological activation. You're triggering something in him that he's spent years avoiding, his own capacity for deep feeling. When someone tells you they're not ready while continuing to seek your presence, they're revealing a split in their psyche. One part craves connection, another part fears it completely, and somehow you've become the battlefield where these two parts of him wage war. Pause here, take a breath. Is this what you've been carrying all along? The question isn't whether you're too much. The question is, what happens when you finally understand that his emotional delay has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with his own unfinished growth? Let me tell you about Sarah. She spent 2 years with a man who would disappear for weeks, then return with flowers and apologies. He had planned future trips together, but pull away when she expressed feelings. He'd call her crying when life got difficult, then retreat into distance the next day. Sarah thought she was the problem. She started editing herself, dimming the parts that seemed to trigger his retreat, becoming a shadow of who she really was. What Sarah didn't understand was that she was dating someone who had never learned to integrate his emotional and rational minds. He understood connection as action, providing, protecting, fixing, but had no framework for emotional intimacy. This is what Jung called emotional delay. When psychological development gets stuck where someone can function in the external world, but cannot access their deeper feeling nature. They excel in careers and manage practical problems, but remain frozen at the emotional age where they first learned that feelings were dangerous. For most men, that freezing happens young. By age 5 or 6, they've internalized messages like, "Big boys don't cry," "Feelings are for girls." Their emotional development gets interrupted at the exact moment when they would naturally begin learning to navigate complex inner states. Neuroscience confirms Jung's intuition. The male brain, when raised in emotionally suppressive environments, develops neural pathways that prioritize logic and emotional control. The limbic system, responsible for emotional processing, often remains underdeveloped. When you enter this person's life with your natural emotional fluency, his nervous system treats it as a threat, not because you're threatening, but because vulnerability feels dangerous to someone who's never learned to navigate it safely. Think about it. If you'd never learned to swim and someone invited you into deep water, your body would panic even if that person was the most skilled swimmer. Your nervous system would register deep water equals potential drowning. That's what happens when emotionally delayed individuals encounter emotionally developed people. The invitation to go deeper triggers their survival instincts. They literally feel like they're drowning in feeling. This creates the push-pull dynamic you know so well. He comes close because his soul craves authentic connection. He pulls away because his nervous system interprets vulnerability as danger, need as weakness. The tragic irony is that what he most fears losing, his sense of self, his freedom, could actually be enhanced through emotional intimacy. But from his perspective, love looks like loss of control, and loss of control feels like death. And here's where most women make a devastating mistake. They respond by pursuing harder, believing more love will cure his fear. Or they withdraw completely, or they dim their own light, becoming smaller to accommodate his limitations. When you pursue, you confirm his fear that connection means being consumed. When you withdraw, you confirm his wound that love abandons him when he's vulnerable. When you dim yourself, you rob him of the mirror of your authentic presence. All three responses come from the same place: the belief that his emotional unavailability is your responsibility to fix. But here's the truth: you cannot heal someone else's emotional delay. Only they can do that work. What you can do is refuse to sacrifice your own emotional availability on the altar of someone else's limitations. In your journal tonight, write this question: where have I been making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's emotional limitations? Jung discovered that growth happens not when we protect people from discomfort, but when we hold space for their discomfort while remaining true to our own needs. The most loving thing you can do is remain emotionally available to yourself first, and then to them at a level that honors your own development. You're not too much. You're just more emotionally developed than someone who never learned to feel without fear. Here's the truth that will change everything. He's not rejecting you. He's rejecting the emotional activation that only you could awaken. You are not too much. You're a mirror reflecting a part of him that he doesn't dare to look at yet. Jung called this shadow confrontation, when your presence forces someone to see aspects of themselves they've kept hidden. Not because these aspects are bad, but because they've been deemed unsafe by a world that rewards emotional numbness. The shadow contains their capacity for tenderness, vulnerability, emotional expression, and deep intimacy. These aren't weaknesses, they're profound strengths that have been culturally demonized. Think about when he seems most connected to you. Usually when his defenses are down, when he's tired, when something vulnerable has happened. In those moments, you glimpse who he really is beneath the armor. You see the man who feels deeply, who craves authentic connection, who longs to be truly known. You see the part that wants to cry when overwhelmed, to be held when scared, to express love without fear. But then morning comes. Logic returns. The fear returns. He retreats into safer emotional distance. This isn't personal cruelty. This is psychological self-protection. Imagine learning your whole life that emotion's a weakness, that vulnerability is dangerous. Then meeting someone who makes you feel so deeply that all those rules start crumbling. That's terrifying for someone who's built their identity around emotional control. You cannot force someone to integrate their shadow. You can only create conditions where integration becomes possible, and that requires you to stop making his emotional journey about your worth. Let me tell you about Marcus and Elena. Marcus was 32 when he met Elena. For months, he told her he wasn't ready for a relationship while texting her daily. He'd spend hours on the phone, sharing vulnerabilities he'd never revealed. He'd make love to her with tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, then not call for days, retreating into work and distractions. Elena found herself in an exhausting cycle of hope and disappointment. When together, she felt completely loved. When he pulled away, she felt confused and not enough. Initially, Elena did what most women do, analyzed every text, wondered what she'd done wrong, tried to be the cool girl who didn't ask for too much. But the more she diminished herself, the more distant he became. After months of this painful dance, Elena had her awakening moment. She realized she was abandoning herself to chase someone who was abandoning himself to avoid her love. She told him, "Marcus, I see you. I see the part that wants connection and the part that's terrified of it. I care deeply about you, and I also care about myself. I can't continue waiting for you to resolve your internal conflict. I'm going to live my life fully and make space for someone who doesn't need convincing that I am worth choosing." Then she meant it. She stopped analyzing his signals, started dating others, focused on her own growth. She took the painting class she'd postponed, planned a solo trip, invested in friendships that celebrated her depth. Within 3 months, Marcus was in therapy, not because Elena demanded it, but because her clarity created space for him to see his own confusion clearly. When you stop making someone else's emotional availability your project, you create what Jung called the transcendent function, a psychological space where transformation can occur naturally. But this only works when you're genuinely unattached to the outcome, not pretending while secretly hoping he'll change. Actually unattached, because you've remembered that your happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's emotional development. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror. The shadow he's rejecting is his capacity for transformational love, the kind that asks him to grow beyond who he's been, to show up as his fullest self. When he says he's not ready, he's really saying, "I'm not ready to let go of this identity I've built around emotional independence, even though it's keeping me from what I most want." That's a sacred fear. It deserves respect, not resentment. But it doesn't deserve your sacrifice. You cannot love someone into readiness. You cannot convince someone to want growth. You cannot save someone from their developmental process. What you can do is refuse to shrink yourself to match someone else's limitations. What you can do is trust that your love, your real, full, unapologetic love, is a gift, not a burden. What you can do is understand that anyone who experiences your love as too much simply isn't ready for the abundance you bring. And that's information, not rejection. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But transformation requires two people willing to be changed by love. If only one person is willing, there can be attraction, chemistry, even deep affection. But there cannot be the kind of love that evolves both people into their highest selves. And you deserve that evolutionary love, right now as you are. So how do you reclaim your power in this situation? How do you love someone who is emotionally delayed while still loving yourself? How do you navigate this complex dynamic without losing your sense of self or your faith in love itself? The answer lies in what I call loving detachment, a state where you can care deeply about someone while refusing to make their emotional availability your personal responsibility or your life's project. This isn't the cold detachment of indifference or the strategic detachment of manipulation. This is the warm detachment of wisdom, caring from a place of wholeness rather than need, loving from overflow rather than emptiness, giving from choice rather than desperation. Loving detachment means you can hold space for someone's growth without making that growth a condition of your own happiness. You can see their potential without requiring them to fulfill it on your timeline. You can offer your love without demanding that they receive it in the way you want to give it. First, stop waiting for certainty from someone who isn't certain about themselves. When someone tells you they're not ready, believe them the first time. Not because they'll never be ready, but because right now, in this moment, they're telling you their truth. Honor that truth instead of trying to argue with it. Convince them out of it or wait patiently for them to change their mind. Your job isn't to convince them otherwise. Your job is to decide what you want to do with that information. Do you want to invest your precious life energy in someone who may or may not become available? Do you want to put your own growth on hold while waiting for someone else to catch up emotionally? Do you want to teach someone how to love you Or would you rather be with someone who already knows how? Do you want to be someone's practice relationship, while they learn emotional skills they should have developed years ago? These aren't judgmental questions. They're practical ones about how you want to spend the finite resource of your time and energy, about what you're willing to accept and what you're ready to outgrow. Jung taught that individuation, becoming who you're meant to be, requires making conscious choices rather than unconscious reactions. Most of us react to emotional unavailability with either anxious pursuit or wounded withdrawal. Both reactions give away our power to someone else's emotional limitations. The conscious choice is different. It sounds like this: I value what we share, and I also value myself too much to remain in limbo indefinitely. I'm not asking you to change or commit before you're ready. I'm not trying to control your process or rush your timeline. I'm simply choosing not to wait for someone to choose me while I could be living my life fully. This creates what psychologists call healthy boundaries, limits that protect your energy while respecting the other person's autonomy and right to their own developmental process. But here's the deeper layer. Healthy boundaries aren't just about what you won't accept. They're about what you will create for yourself instead. They're not just protective, they're generative. While he figures out his emotional availability, you get to focus on your own emotional development. While he decides whether he wants commitment, you get to practice commitment to yourself, to your dreams, your growth, your healing, your joy. While he works through his fear of intimacy, you get to cultivate deeper intimacy with your own soul, your own needs, your own authentic desires. This isn't about punishing him or playing games. This is about remembering that your life is happening right now, not in some future moment when someone else becomes ready to receive your love fully. Think about all the energy you've been putting into analyzing his behavior, trying to understand his contradictions, managing your reactions to his mixed signals. What if you redirected all that mental and emotional energy toward your own life, your own dreams, your own growth? What would you do with your life if you knew that no one was coming to save you, complete you, or validate your worth? What dreams have you put on hold while waiting for someone else to get emotionally ready? What parts of yourself have you neglected while focusing on someone else's emotional development? The most powerful thing you can do when someone is emotionally unavailable is to become more available to yourself. Start the creative project you've been putting off while waiting for your life to begin. Take the trip you've been planning, but postponing because you weren't sure if you'd be doing it alone. Invest in the friendships that nourish you instead of depleting you. The relationships where you don't have to edit yourself to be acceptable. Build the career that excites you instead of just paying the bills. Learn the skills you've always wanted to develop. Create the home environment that reflects your authentic taste instead of compromising to accommodate someone else's preferences. Date yourself with the same intentionality, creativity, and devotion you've been bringing to dating him. When you do this, when you truly do this, not as a strategy to win him back, but as a genuine investment in your own life, something magical happens. You stop needing his validation because you're giving yourself something far more reliable. Your own attention, your own care, your own appreciation, your own loyalty. You stop analyzing every text message because you're too engaged with your own interesting life to obsess over someone else's emotional availability. You stop feeling like something is missing because you're actively creating fulfillment from your own choices and actions. And paradoxically, this makes you incredibly attractive to emotionally available people. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're genuinely hard to get. You're not available to just anyone anymore. You're only available to people who can match your level of emotional development and commitment to growth. People who see your depth as a treasure rather than a threat. People who experience your love as a gift rather than a burden. Remember Elena's story? 6 months after she established that boundary with Marcus, she met David at her painting class. David was someone who had done his own emotional work, who could receive her love without fear, who celebrated her emotional intelligence instead of asking her to dim it. When Marcus finally did the therapy work and reached out to Eleanor again, ready for the kind of relationship she'd always wanted, she was already in love with someone who had been ready all along. This isn't about revenge or making anyone suffer. It's about the natural consequence of choosing yourself. When you stop being available for half love, you create space for whole love to enter your life. The universe has a way of matching your energy. When you're operating from the energy of, "I'll take whatever scraps of affection I can get," you attract people who offer scraps. When you're operating from the energy of, "I deserve and expect full, conscious, committed love," you attract people who are capable of giving that. But this shift has to be real, not perform. You can't fake self-love to attract better love. You have to actually love yourself, your needs, your desires, your boundaries, your dreams, your complexity, your emotional nature, all of it. This is the deeper work that Jung pointed toward in all his writings about individuation. Becoming whole isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about becoming so complete within yourself that you can share your wholeness with another whole person. When two emotionally mature, individuated people come together, they don't lose themselves in each other. They discover more of themselves through each other. They don't complete each other. They celebrate each other. They don't need each other. They choose each other again and again from freedom rather than fear. This is the love that's waiting for you on the other side of choosing yourself. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want you to understand something profound about what you've been experiencing, something that will reframe everything you thought you knew about this painful chapter of your life. This relationship, loving someone who can't fully receive your love, isn't a mistake or a failure. It isn't evidence that you're too much, too needy, too intense, or that love isn't meant for you. It isn't proof that you're unworthy or that there's something fundamentally wrong with how you love. It's been a sacred invitation disguised as heartbreak, an invitation to remember that your worth isn't determined by someone else's capacity to see it clearly. An invitation to discover that your love isn't too much. It's simply more developed than what some people are ready to receive. An invitation to stop making yourself smaller so that others can feel more comfortable with their own limitations. An invitation to reclaim the parts of yourself you've been willing to sacrifice for the possibility of love. Jung discovered that every relationship crisis is actually an individuation crisis, a call to become more yourself, not less. Every heartbreak is an opportunity to break open to a deeper understanding of your own worth, your own needs, your own capacity for love. The pain you felt isn't just about losing someone or being rejected by someone. It's about the parts of yourself you've been willing to abandon in pursuit of someone else's acceptance. It's about the voice of your own intuition that you've been ignoring in favor of his contradictory words. It's about the dreams you've put on hold while waiting for someone else to get ready to join you in building them. It's about the energy you've been spending trying to solve someone else's emotional puzzles instead of investing in your own growth and joy. And now you get to reclaim all of that. Now you get to remember that you are not someone who waits to be chosen. You are someone who chooses, consciously, intentionally, from a place of self-knowledge rather than desperation. You choose how to spend your energy and with whom. You choose what kind of love you're available for and what you're no longer willing to accept. You choose what you're willing to give and what you require in return. You choose to honor your own emotional development instead of dimming it to accommodate someone else's delays. The man who told you he wasn't ready? In his own unconscious way, he gave you a tremendous gift. Not the gift he intended to give, perhaps, but a gift nonetheless. He showed you exactly where you were abandoning yourself in relationships. He revealed exactly where you needed to develop stronger boundaries and deeper self-respect. He highlighted exactly where you were seeking external validation instead of trusting your own internal knowing. He demonstrated the difference between someone who loves you and someone who's ready to love you fully. These are profound gifts, even when they come wrapped in disappointment and confusion. Because now you know. Now you have the information you need to make different choices. Now you know that you're not too much. You're just more emotionally present than those who never learned how to feel without fear. And that's your power. Not the power to make someone ready who isn't ready. Not the power to convince someone to want what you want, but the power to love yourself so completely, so unconditionally, that you naturally attract people who are already prepared to receive the fullness of what you offer. Let me tell you about what happened to Sarah, whose story I shared earlier. After 2 years of trying to make herself smaller for a man who couldn't handle her depth, Sarah finally chose herself. She ended that relationship and spent a year learning to love her own intensity, her own emotional intelligence, her own capacity for deep feeling. She stopped seeing these qualities as flaws to hide and started experiencing them as gifts to celebrate. She surrounded herself with friends who appreciated her emotional insight. She pursued work that honored her empathetic nature. She dated herself with the same care and attention she'd been offering to others. When she met James, she was a different person, not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd remembered who she was. James didn't ask her to be less emotional, less intense, less deep. He celebrated these qualities because he possessed them himself. He'd done his own work to develop emotional fluency. Their relationship didn't require her to dim her light, or him to perform readiness he didn't feel. It was built on mutual emotional availability, mutual commitment to growth, mutual celebration of depth and authenticity. Sarah often says that her relationship with the emotionally unavailable man was necessary preparation for her relationship with James. It taught her to value her own emotional development, to recognize emotional availability in others, and to never again accept love that asked her to be less than she was. Write this in your journal tonight. I am not too much. I am exactly enough for someone who is ready for this much love. I am worthy of love that celebrates my depth, honors my intensity, and rises to meet my emotional intelligence. Not love that asks me to hide these gifts. The relationships that are meant for you will not require you to edit yourself, suppress your feelings, or apologize for your emotional nature. The love that is meant for you will celebrate your intensity as passion, honor your vulnerability as courage, and rise to meet your commitment to authentic connection. The person who is meant for you will see your emotional intelligence as wisdom, not weakness. They will experience your love as a gift, not a burden. They will match your depth instead of asking you to become shallow. And until that love arrives, not if, but when, you get to practice being the love you're seeking. You get to give yourself the emotional availability, the consistent presence, the unconditional acceptance you've been craving from others. You get to choose yourself completely and without reservation. Because here's what Jung understood through decades of studying human psychology and what neuroscience now confirms. When you love yourself with the same devotion you've been offering to others, when you become your own secure attachment, when you fill your own cup first, you don't attract people who are emotionally delayed. You attract people who are emotionally evolved, people who see your depth as a treasure, not a threat. People who experience your love as expansion, not constriction. People who are ready not just for your presence, but for your growth, your dreams, your questions, your complexity, your full authentic self. People who don't just want to receive your love, they want to match it, contribute to it, co-create with it. This is the love that exists. This is the love you deserve. This is the love that's waiting for you to believe you're worthy of it. You are not too much. You never were. You were just offering abundant love to people who were living in emotional scarcity. You're just finally ready to stop accepting too little. You're ready to stop making yourself smaller to fit into relationships that were too small for your spirit. And that changes everything. When you truly understand this, not just intellectually, but in your bones, you become magnetic to the kind of love that doesn't ask you to choose between being yourself and being loved. The kind of love that says, yes, all of you, your depth, your intensity, your questions, your growth, your dreams, your emotional intelligence, all of it, especially the parts other people couldn't handle. This is what Jung meant when he wrote about the conjunction of opposites. Not that you need to find someone to complete you, but that you need to become so whole within yourself that you can dance with another whole person in the sacred space between two complete souls. If this message has touched something deep in your heart, if you felt a recognition of truth in these words, take a moment to honor that recognition. Like this video if it served you, and subscribe for more insights on navigating love and relationships through psychological wisdom. But more importantly, take this message into your life. Stop waiting for permission to love yourself fully. Stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth before you believe in it. Practice loving yourself with the same intensity, creativity, and devotion you've been bringing to loving others who weren't ready to receive it. Your future self, the woman who knows her worth, who attracts love that celebrates her instead of merely tolerating her, who builds relationships from wholeness rather than neediness, is waiting for you to remember who you really are. You are not someone who needs to be chosen. You are someone who chooses, and you choose love. Real love. Revolutionary love. The kind that transforms everyone it touches. Because it starts with the radical act of loving yourself exactly as you are. Not the smaller version, not the edited version, not the version that makes other people more comfortable. The real you. The full you. The you who loves deeply and feels fully and isn't afraid of your own emotional intelligence. That's the you who deserves love. That's the you who will find love. That's the you who is already worthy of love, right now, exactly as you are. Until next time, starting with the love you give yourself.